Alien intelligence services warn about human capacity for sustained systematic violence. Part 1. The conference room on Prime held 7 different species, each representing their government's intelligence service. Director stood at the front, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled analysts with growing concern. The holographic display behind him showed a blue and green world called Earth. "We have a problem," said his translator, converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. "The humans are not what they appear to be." Senior analyst Eth, with silver scales and keen observational skills honed over 40 years of service, stood to present her findings. She had spent the last 6 months studying humanity since their first contact with the Galactic Council. What she found disturbed her deeply. "On the surface, humans seem pleasant enough," Eth began. "They're social, cooperative, and genuinely interested in peaceful relations. But I've reviewed their historical databases, and I must warn this council that we are dealing with something unprecedented." She activated the display, showing images from human history. Battlefields, armies, weapons of increasing sophistication spanning thousands of years. "Every species has conflict," Ambassador K interrupted, his crystalline form refracting the light. "This is not unusual." "With respect, Ambassador, it is the nature and duration of their conflicts that concerns me," Eth replied. "Let me provide context. When they fought their last civil war, it lasted 6 weeks before both sides agreed to mediation. When they had their territorial disputes, they fought for 3 months before war weariness forced negotiations. These are typical patterns across the galaxy." She pulled up new data. Humans fought a war they called the 100 Years' War. It lasted 116 years. They fought another conflict called World War I, which killed approximately 17 million beings in 4 years. 21 years later, they fought World War II, which killed approximately 75 million. The room fell silent. Those numbers were staggering. The crystalline ambassador's light dimmed in shock. "But that's not the most concerning part," Eth continued. "Every species in this room views war as an aberration, a temporary madness that must be ended as quickly as possible. Humans have industrialized warfare. They have turned it into a science." She displayed images of human military academies. These are institutions dedicated entirely to the study of warfare. They have existed for centuries. Humans train professional soldiers from youth, teaching them tactics, strategy, and logistics. They study battles from thousands of years ago, learning lessons from defeats and victories alike. They maintain this knowledge even during peacetime. "Surely this is just historical interest," Director suggested, though his voice carried doubt. "I thought so too," Eth said. "Then I found these." She displayed human military doctrine manuals. These are systematized approaches to violence. They have classifications for different types of warfare: conventional, unconventional, guerrilla, counterinsurgency, combined arms operations. They have detailed logistics chains for sustaining military operations across years. They have contingency plans for fighting enemies they haven't even met yet. Junior Analyst N, barely 30 cycles old and new to intelligence work, spoke up nervously. "But surely no species actually prepares for theoretical wars." "Every human military does exactly that," Eth replied. "They run simulations. They conduct exercises. They maintain readiness for conflicts they actively hope will never occur. And here's what truly separates them from us: they have rules for warfare." "Rules?" asked. "They've normalized violence to such a degree that they've created international laws governing how wars should be fought. They have treaties about which weapons are acceptable, how to treat prisoners, what constitutes a war crime. The implication is staggering. They've accepted warfare as such a regular occurrence that it requires regulation, like trade or commerce." Eth pulled up more data, her voice growing more urgent. "I analyzed their cultural output, their stories, their games, their entertainment. Military themes are omnipresent. Children play with toy soldiers. Their most popular entertainment often involves military conflict. They celebrate military veterans as heroes. They memorialize their wars with monuments and holidays. This is just cultural expression, Ambassador K protested, but his tone was less certain now. Is it? Eth challenged. Or is it evidence of a species that has integrated warfare so deeply into their identity that they maintain institutional knowledge of violence across generations? Let me show you something else. She displayed human military logistics data. This is a human supply chain for military operations. They can project force across their entire planet. They have systems for feeding, arming, and sustaining millions of soldiers simultaneously. They can manufacture weapons, vehicles, and ammunition on scales that would exhaust most species' entire industrial capacity, and they can maintain this production for years. The room absorbed this information in uncomfortable silence. When the Dominion fought the Collective 3 decades ago, both sides exhausted their military supplies within weeks, Eth noted. They had to negotiate because neither could continue fighting. Humans fought their World War II for 6 years. Their industrial production increased throughout the entire conflict. They adapted, innovated, and scaled up manufacturing even while fighting. She paused, letting her next words carry full weight. They have a concept called total war. It means mobilizing their entire society, every factory, every resource, every citizen, toward military victory. Most species can't even conceive of such organization, let alone implement it. Director's expression darkened. What are you suggesting, Analyst Ev? I'm suggesting that humans possess a unique and dangerous capability, she said carefully. They are individually peaceful, even kind. Their diplomats are genuine in their desire for cooperation. But as a species, they have developed an unparalleled capacity for sustained, systematic violence. If provoked, they won't just fight. They'll organize, adapt, and prosecute warfare with an efficiency we've never encountered. Your fear, Ambassador K said, but his protest sounded hollow. Am I? Eth pulled up one final document. This is a human military document titled Operational Planning for Extrasolar Conflict. It was written before they achieved faster-than-light travel. They were already planning how to fight wars in space against species they'd never met. The implications hung heavy in the air. Junior Analyst N looked ill, his skin shifting to a pale gray. What do you recommend? Director asked quietly. Full intelligence monitoring, Eth said immediately. We maintain friendly relations, absolutely, but we must ensure the Galactic Council understands what they're dealing with. Humans are not naturally more aggressive than other species, but they are infinitely more competent at organized violence. We must never, under any circumstances, give them cause for sustained conflict. She deactivated the display and faced the assembled intelligence officers. Most species, when threatened, will fight until the immediate danger passes or casualties become unbearable. Humans will fight until they achieve their objectives or their enemy is completely defeated. They have a term for it: unconditional surrender. They will pursue victory with systematic determination that most species cannot match or even understand. Director stood silent for a long moment, processing everything. Finally, he spoke. I will present a classified brief to the Council. Will recommend caution in all dealings with humanity, not hostility but awareness. One more thing, Director, Eth added. In my research, I found something that should give us hope. Humans study war so intensely because they fear it deeply. They maintain such detailed knowledge of violence because they understand its costs. Their military institutions exist partly to prevent wars, not just fight them. They have a saying: those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. They remember every war, every casualty, every mistake. Is that supposed to be comforting? Ambassador K asked. Perhaps, Eth said. It means they can be reasoned with. They don't want war, they're just terrifyingly prepared for it if it comes. As long as we treat them fairly and honor our agreements, we should be safe. But if anyone in the galaxy decides to test them, to push them into a corner, or to threaten their survival, she trailed off. Then what? In asked nervously. Ed's expression was grim. Then we'll discover that every warning in my report was understated, and by the time we realize our mistake, it will be far too late to stop what we've started. Director closed the meeting with a simple order: prepare the full report. The Council needs to know exactly what humanity is capable of. Let's hope they never have to demonstrate it. Part 2. 3 years passed since the intelligence briefing, and the Dominion had grown bold. They were an empire built on conquest, with a military tradition spanning 5 centuries. When they reviewed the Council's classified assessment of humanity, their high command laughed. War Master L studied the human colony on 442B through his tactical display. The mining settlement held perhaps 30,000 humans, defended by a single orbital station and 2 patrol craft. His fleet of 80 warships surrounded the planet like a claw preparing to strike. Intelligence warns us to fear these creatures. L's mandibles clicked in amusement. They're barely space-faring. 3 years of exploration, and this is their furthest outpost. We'll crush them in hours. His second-in-command, Tactical Officer K, was less certain. The reports suggested caution, War Master. Perhaps we should. Reports written by cowards and analysts who never seen battle, L interrupted. I've conquered 17 systems. These humans have conquered none. Attack. The fleet opened fire. The human orbital station's shields collapsed within minutes. The patrol craft managed to destroy 2 vessels before being obliterated. Within 3 hours, dropships landed near the mining colony's central hub. But the humans didn't surrender. The colonists retreated into the mining tunnels, where sensors couldn't track them effectively. What they expected to be a simple occupation became a grinding, frustrating hunt through kilometers of underground passages. The humans had collapsed key tunnels, trapped others, and organized defensive positions with surprising speed. They're fighting like trained soldiers, Kay reported after the first day. But these are supposed to be miners and civilians. Then they'll die like soldiers, L snarled. Continue operations. On the 4th day, while the forces were still digging humans out of the mining tunnels, a human fleet arrived. Not a massive fleet, only 37 vessels, but they fought with a coordination that shocked the commanders. They used tactics they had never encountered: feints, concentrated fire on disabled ships, targeting support vessels instead of fighting capital ships directly. L's fleet held numerical superiority, but the battle lasted 6 hours and cost him 19 ships. The humans lost 12. When the human fleet retreated, they'd successfully evacuated 17,000 colonists from the planet's surface. That was a defeat, Kay said quietly. A setback, L corrected, but his voice carried less certainty. We still hold the planet. Earth will negotiate now. Earth did not negotiate. Instead, they declared war. Not a limited war, not a police action, but total war. Within 2 weeks, every human colony began mobilization. Civilian ships were converted to military use. Factories that made consumer goods switched to weapons production. Most disturbing to intelligence, humans who'd been farmers, teachers, and engineers weeks earlier were now training as soldiers. The Galactic Council attempted to mediate. Humanity sent Ambassador Sarah to explain their position. We will accept nothing less than complete withdrawal from all human territory and reparations for the colony they attacked, stated calmly. These terms are non-negotiable. The delegation found this absurd. You have 37 warships, their representative said. We have hundreds. You're a species barely out of your home system. We've conquered systems for 500 years. You cannot win. We don't need to win quickly, replied. We just need to win eventually. It was a statement they didn't understand until much later. By the 2nd month of the war, human production had tripled. Their shipyards worked around the clock. more troubling to the humans were learning. Every engagement was followed by detailed analysis. When the used a tactic successfully, humans adapted by the next battle. When weapons proved effective, humans developed countermeasures within weeks. It was as if the entire human military was one vast learning organism, studying its enemy with cold, systematic precision. War Master L won battles but found no path to victory. Each human defeat taught them lessons. Each victory cost ships they couldn't easily replace. The humans were spending resources at a rate that should have bankrupted them, but their economy kept expanding to meet military needs. "They're not fighting like any species I've studied," L admitted to K during the third month. "Where are they getting all these ships, these weapons?" K pulled up intelligence reports. They've converted 40% of their industrial capacity to military production. Civilian quality of life has decreased significantly, but there's no civil unrest. They're accepting the sacrifice. "That's impossible," L said. "No population accepts prolonged hardship without protest." "Apparently humans do, and War Master, there's something else." K displayed casualty figures. "We've killed over 70,000 humans. They've killed 32,000 of our forces, yet their offensive operations have intensified, not decreased." This violated everything they understood about warfare. Every species reached a breaking point where casualties forced negotiation. The humans seemed to have no such point. By the fourth month, Analyst Eth was dispatched by the Galactic Council to observe the conflict. She watched from a council monitoring station as human tactics evolved in real time. "They're treating this like a laboratory," she explained to the council observers. "Every battle is an experiment. They're testing what works, discarding what doesn't, and building a systematic understanding of how to defeat them." "But the casualties," an observer protested. "Surely they'll seek peace soon." Eth thought of her report from 3 years ago, the warnings no one had truly believed. "No," she said quietly. "They won't. They're just getting started." She was right. In the 5th month, humanity launched what they called Operation Hammer. It wasn't a single battle but a coordinated campaign across 7 systems. Human forces struck supply lines, communication relays, and staging areas simultaneously. It was warfare conducted with the precision of a chess master, each move supporting others in a complex pattern they struggled to counter. War Master L found himself reacting instead of acting, always one step behind human planning. His forces were still superior in numbers, but humans fought smarter. They avoided battles they couldn't win and pressed advantages ruthlessly when they had them. "Request reinforcements from High Command," L ordered after losing another supply depot, "and request permission to use graviton weapons." Graviton weapons were banned by Galactic Council treaty but devastating in effect. K hesitated. "War Master, that would make us pariahs in the Council." "Do you want to explain to High Command how we lost to a species that's been in space for 3 years?" L snapped. The reinforcements came. The graviton weapons did not. High Command feared Council sanctions more than human forces, but they sent an additional 60 warships and authorization to conscript warriors from subjugated territories. By the 6th month, both sides had roughly equivalent forces, approximately 180 warships each. They expected this to lead to decisive battle. The humans did something unexpected. They bypassed the main fleet entirely and struck at logistics. Human forces, operating in small, fast squadrons, targeted fuel depots, repair facilities, and supply convoys. They didn't fight honorably or seek glory. They fought to win. "They're avoiding battle," L said, confused and frustrated. "No," K corrected, finally understanding. "They're fighting a different kind of war. They're trying to make it impossible for us to sustain operations." It was working. By the 7th month, forces were running low on supplies. Ships couldn't be properly repaired. Crews were exhausted from constant alert status. Meanwhile, human production continued increasing. They were now launching new vessels at twice the rate they lost them. Eth watched from the monitoring station as the war entered its 8th month. The Galactic Council was growing alarmed, not at humanity's aggression, but at their competence. This wasn't a species fighting in desperate self-defense. This was a species prosecuting war with systematic efficiency. "They're going to win," she told the other observers. "They just don't realize it yet." War Master L realized it 2 weeks later when his fleet, starved of supplies and facing a human force that had grown to 230 warships, faced encirclement at the forward base of 3. He could fight and likely lose everything, or he could retreat and admit defeat. For the first time in history, their forces chose retreat. They abandoned 3, abandoned the systems they'd captured, and fell back to their core territory. The war had lasted 8 months and 13 days. They had started with overwhelming superiority. They ended with a shattered fleet and a shocked high command trying to understand how they'd lost to an enemy that shouldn't have been able to resist them. Humanity accepted the surrender with calm professionalism. They demanded reparations, territorial concessions, and a formal apology. They got all 3. And the galaxy watched in stunned silence, finally understanding that the intelligence warnings had been completely correct. Part 3. The Galactic Council's emergency session 6 weeks after the war's end was the most well-attended in Council history. Every member species sent representatives. Many non-member species sent observers. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened. Director, now elderly and near retirement, opened the session with somber words. "We stand at a crossroads. The human war has demonstrated something we hoped never to see. We now must decide how the galaxy responds to humanity's existence." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species demanded human military restrictions. Others suggested quarantine or containment. A few even whispered about preemptive action, though none dared say it openly. Eth, recently promoted to Special Advisor on Human Affairs, waited for the chaos to subside before speaking. When Director recognized her, the chamber fell silent. Everyone had read her original assessment. She'd been right about everything. "I understand the fear in this chamber," Eth began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. 3 years ago, I warned this council about human capabilities. Many dismissed my concerns. They paid for that dismissal with 23,000 lives and military supremacy they'd built over 5 centuries. But fear is not wisdom, and fear will lead us to disaster if we let it guide policy. She activated the central display, showing data from the recent war. "Let me explain exactly what happened and what it means for our future. They lost because they fundamentally misunderstood their enemy. They saw humans as weak because humanity had few ships and limited territory. They failed to recognize that humans separate the capacity for violence from the immediate execution of violence." Ambassador K, present at both the original briefing and this session, spoke up. "Your original report emphasized human systematization of warfare. We saw that play out exactly as you predicted." "Yes, but there's more to understand," Eth replied. "Watch this timeline." She displayed the war's progression. "Notice that human military capabilities increased throughout the entire conflict. Most species reach maximum military capacity quickly, then sustain it until resources deplete. Humans started at perhaps 20% of their capacity and scaled up continuously. By the war's end, they'd mobilized approximately 40% of their industrial economy for military purposes and showed no signs of slowing." A council member asked the question everyone was thinking: what would happen at 100% mobilization? Based on their World War II historical data, they could sustain a military approximately 15 times larger than what they fielded against the, Eth answered. And they could maintain that force for years. The chamber absorbed this in shocked silence. "But here's what you need to understand," Eth continued. Humans don't want to mobilize. They don't want war. They ended the conflict the moment they sued for peace. They demanded reparations and apologies, not territory or subjugation. They proved they could destroy the empire, but they chose not to. That's supposed to comfort us, someone called out. It should, Eth said firmly, because it reveals something crucial about human nature. They separate emotion from strategy. Their capacity for systematic violence is matched by their capacity for systematic peace. When they sign treaties, they honor them. When they make alliances, they maintain them. When they commit to long-term projects, they see them through regardless of obstacles. She pulled up new data. In the 6 weeks since the war ended, humans have done something unprecedented. They've offered humanitarian aid to displaced civilians. They've shared medical technology to help treat wounded. And they've proposed a cultural exchange program with the Dominion. Why would they do that? Director asked, genuinely puzzled. Because humans study history obsessively, and they know that humiliating defeated enemies creates future conflicts, Eth explained. They have a historical example from their World War I that led directly to World War II. They learned that lesson. They're trying to turn an enemy into a future partner. She looked around the chamber. This is what I'm trying to make you understand. Yes, humans are dangerous. Yes, their capacity for organized violence exceeds anything we've encountered. But that same systematic thinking makes them extraordinarily reliable allies. They honor commitments across generations. They maintain institutional memory of agreements made decades or centuries ago. They can be trusted precisely because they think long-term about everything, including peace. Ambassador, representing humanity at the session, requested permission to speak. When granted, she stood calmly despite being the focus of every eye in the chamber. I understand the Council's concerns, said simply. You've seen what we're capable of when threatened. I won't pretend we're not dangerous, we are. But I want to share something my grandmother told me when I was young. She was a soldier in one of our Earth's wars, and she said the best warriors are those who understand war well enough to prevent it. She paused, letting the translation systems catch up. Humanity maintains military readiness because we know what happens when we're unprepared. We study warfare because we remember what it costs. Every name on our war memorials is a person someone loved, someone who died because diplomacy failed. We remember them specifically so we'll work harder to make peace work. Pretty words, a skeptical counselor muttered. Perhaps, acknowledged, but backed by actions. We stopped fighting the instant they surrendered. We could have pressed our advantage, seized territory, destroyed their fleet completely. We didn't. We took what we needed to ensure our security and offered peace. That's not the action of a species that loves war. That's the action of a species that understands its costs. Eth resumed her presentation. I'm recommending a complete reversal of containment proposals. Instead, we should integrate humanity into Galactic Council structures as quickly as possible. Make them stakeholders in galactic peace. Give them reasons to invest in the current order rather than viewing it as something imposed upon them. You want to reward them for defeating someone asked incredulously. I want to make them our allies before someone else makes them enemies, Eth corrected sharply. Because if this council treats humanity as a threat to be contained, they will become exactly that. And unlike we won't have the luxury of learning from our mistakes. We'll simply lose. The debate continued for hours, but eventually, Eth's position won majority support. Humanity would be offered full membership in the Galactic Council, with all associated rights and responsibilities. In exchange, they would integrate their military command structure with Council peacekeeping forces and share their systematic approach to logistics and planning. 5 years later, Eth sat in her office as director of the Intelligence Directorate, a position she'd inherited from the retired. Across from her sat Colonel Sarah, now the human liaison to Council Intelligence Services. The Empire is mobilizing forces on the frontier, said, displaying tactical data. Our analysis suggests they're planning aggressive expansion within the next 6 months. Eth studied the information. It was presented in a format that hadn't existed 5 years ago, systematic, detailed, and accompanied by multiple contingency assessments. Human military thinking had permeated council operations entirely. "What do you recommend?" Eth asked. "Show of force," replied immediately. "Deploy a council fleet to the border. Make it clear that expansion will be opposed. If we demonstrate capability and resolve now, we prevent conflict later." It was pure human doctrine. Prepare for war to prevent war. And it was working. In the 5 years since humanity joined the Council, there hadn't been a single major conflict. Aggressive species saw the Council's new systematic approach to defense and chose diplomacy instead. "I'll present your recommendation to the Council tomorrow," Eth said. "They'll approve it. They always do now." Smiled slightly. "You were right, in your original report. We are dangerous." "I know," Eth said. "That's why I fought so hard to make you our friends instead of our enemies." "Was it difficult, convincing the Council?" "Terrifying," Eth admitted. "Because I knew that if I was wrong about human trustworthiness, I'd have invited a predator into our midst, but I wasn't wrong." "No," agreed. "We keep our promises. It's part of that systematic thinking you find so alarming." Eth's expression softened into something almost like amusement. "You know what the irony is? Humanity has become the galaxy's greatest defense against war, not because you're peaceful, you're not, particularly, but because you understand violence so thoroughly that you know exactly how to prevent it." "My grandmother would have appreciated that," said quietly. "She always said the best way to honor the dead was to make their sacrifice mean something. Every war we prevent is a memorial to everyone who died in wars we couldn't prevent." After left, Eth reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The galaxy was more stable than it had been in centuries. Trade flourished. Conflicts were resolved through negotiation. The Council's peacekeeping forces, now operating with human-influence doctrine, maintained order with remarkable efficiency. She thought about her original warning: never give humans cause for sustained conflict. The Council had learned that lesson, but they'd learned something more important: never give humans cause to be your enemy, because they make extraordinary allies. The same species that could systematically destroy opponents could systematically build peace. The same institutional memory that preserved knowledge of warfare preserved knowledge of diplomacy. The same long-term thinking that made them formidable in conflict made them invaluable in cooperation. Eth opened her personal log and added a final note to her original assessment from 8 years ago. Humanity's capacity for sustained systematic violence was correctly identified as unprecedented. However, the original assessment was incomplete. Their capacity for sustained systematic cooperation is equally unprecedented. Recommend continued alliance and integration. Humanity is not a threat to galactic peace. They are its foundation." She closed the file and looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled alongside Council vessels. Human advisors trained Council forces. Human systematic thinking shaped galactic policy. The galaxy had feared humanity's capacity for war. Now it depended on that same capacity to maintain peace. It was, Eth reflected, the most successful intelligence assessment she'd ever made. Not because she'd identified a threat, but because she'd recognized an opportunity. The species everyone feared had become the species everyone needed, and the galaxy was safer for it.